You're listening to Codepunk with Bill Ahern and Michael Zuhl, a podcast about the intersection between programming, technology, and the digital lifestyle.
Bill, what's going on?
Michael, how you doing, man?
So at the end of the last episode, I said something stupid because I'll say I'll talk to you later or whatever. And, we're recording this one right after that one. So it was maybe a 2-second break.
Well, no, but I figure really you're talking to the audience. So technically, right, like we have to make allowances for that gap in time.
That is very true. Very true.
Yeah.
I know. So this is going to be an interesting episode because we have spent a lot of the last several episodes talking almost exclusively about technology. I mean, we did .NET, we did JavaScript frameworks, we talked about Bitcoin and the blockchain, and we talked about Tor, which are all very cyber-esque and programmer related. And the purpose of this podcast is not just to go over technology, but kind of how it intersects with the digital lifestyle, and with you and I both being big cyberpunk fans. We've been trying to find ways to incorporate some of those cyberpunk elements into what we do, and we've made a lot of improvements to the podcast over the last several episodes. The audio quality has been there for the last 4 or 5, maybe 6, maybe 4 or 5. Your wife was nice enough to do the intros for us, so we now have intros and outros, and she sounds way better than both of us combined. So there's a plus there. And I'm trying to work on being a little more concise with statements that I make, because sometimes I tend to ramble on after I've made a point and reiterate the point as if I'm trying to convince everybody multiple times. So we've been slowly getting there, and the website's been getting good hits. The podcast itself has been getting some great downloads, and we want to kind of, I know you and I had talked about the potential of incorporating segments if we were to have some sort of a segment that pulls directly from cyberpunk or some other aspect. So those are little elements that we're still working on and we're still talking about and trying to figure out. We'll probably get into more of that after. So this is being recorded on December 12th. The Thanksgiving holiday kind of backed us up a little bit. Because my wife was trying to cook a turkey for the first time and make it come out okay. And I know
how'd that go?
It went great. I mean, it was the first awesome. It was the first turkey she's ever cooked on her own. She was terrified of having to do it. And my wife is the type of person that if the chicken comes out juicy, she must not have cooked it long enough. So she will overcook the chicken until it's dry. And to her, okay, now it's fine. Just add some salad dressing to it if you want it to be juicier. So she cooked the turkey perfectly, to the temperature it was supposed to be. The turkey came out juicy, and of course she's still paranoid. I'm not sure if it's cooked or not, but it was great. And it was a great Thanksgiving. It was just the two of us and the kids. We didn't go anywhere. And for the holiday season, obviously we're going to travel. And I know your wife was throwing together a Thanksgiving dinner for you guys, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a big dinner. She overextended herself. I mean, she made a lot of food, but we didn't eat until like 8.
Okay,
and
wow.
Normally, I know a lot of Thanksgivings start early, like around 3 or 4. Right. And we were way late. We planned on being around 4,
okay.
But we had so much food to catch up to. But no, it was a good Thanksgiving. But back to your point with the cyberpunk stuff, here's a funny thing, and I find it very interesting. Having been a big fan of cyberpunk for a long time, there was a point where after I'd say, I can't nail down specifics, but cyberpunk went from being a niche thing to kind of, in a way, broadly influencing a lot of the way people consumed entertainment,
right.
With the Matrix. I would say the Matrix kind of was a turning point. People were more aware of like that cyber, hacker, and, maybe people associate a little too much wearing of black vinyl with hackers and cyberpunks. But, then there was sort of a downturn. Cyberpunk became passé. Mm-hmm. Like everyone knew what it was and nobody cared. And there has been since lately a sort of uptick. Because I keep, like little like filters on, like automatic web searches. So I'll get something in my feed reader that when there's mentions in the news or entertainment media about cyberpunk, whether it be movies, games, or just some sort of correlation in society with it. And there's been a rise in the interest, or I guess maybe just kind of the characterization of cyberpunk. And it's really interesting to me because I think Well, my personal belief, and it's not a theory of why there's more conversation about cyberpunk, but is because we're entering a world now that the world we live in is beginning to very closely mirror the worlds that were explained in books like Neuromancer and movies like The Matrix.
Absolutely.
Less The Matrix, yeah, because the real world in The Matrix was very, 2000, 1999.
Right.
But, we live in a world where we've got hackers globally affecting possibly outcomes of U.S. elections, and all it's so prevalent now, just the way that people interact, live, spend money, build relationships on the internet. So we are living in a cyberpunk world, and movies like Strange Days, so almost like prescient in how they predicted the world we live in, because not only did cyberpunk talk about technology, but cyberpunk was also dystopian. It didn't just talk about technology, but the technology that existed in a world that was dark, violent, and run by corrupt corporations. In fact, the fact that the corruption wasn't even a factor. It was just corporations were the authority. And that was it. It wasn't even a matter of corruption. They got past the point where people said, oh, this is corrupt, I need to do something about it, and just accepted it as normal, which is where we are today.
Right. And without getting political, at least not in this episode, if you were to work under the assumption that Trump was not going to be a good president, and that he was stacking his cabinet with wealthy business owners meant to control things and meant to move things in their own interest. And if we take a look at the potential Secretary of State, Tillerman, I believe his name is, who is the CEO of ExxonMobil, you could argue that ExxonMobil is very close to the epitome of an early formation of this type of global corporation that controls governments in an attempt to control people, in the same sense that a lot of the cyberpunk corporations did the same. So you're right. There's this interesting parallel where technology is outpacing the ethics of that technology. And if corporations continue to gain power in the sense that they're trying to acquire it on a global scale across nations rather than within nations, you end up in a situation to where it doesn't matter who the presidents are, because the people pulling the strings are those wealthy CEOs and are those corporations.
Right, which is very true. I mean, we do now know, and even prior to President-elect Trump, even with Obama, and just in the last decade, we're very aware of the fact that bankers and wealthy oil industrialists are calling the shots. Now, of course, with the kind of cabinet that Donald Trump has built for himself, these are all CEOs. These aren't lawyers. These aren't social workers. This is truly a literal oligarchy.
Right.
It's just very interesting. We live in the world that was sort of prophesized by movies, again, like Strange Days, which is what we're going to talk about. And it's amazing to go back and watch Strange Days. And although we're not quite there, we don't have giant armored tanks in the street yet, but there have been situations where it happens, right? Look at Baltimore.
Right.
I mean, that happened. I mean, it's not, that obviously it was taking place, that kind of police presence, because it was extenuating circumstances, something was happening, but I really don't think that we're, right around the corner from a total police state. But it does scare me because we are so close, and there are events that could happen that would tip us in that direction. Police are becoming more militarized. There's no question about that.
Right. And we'll get into kind of the parallels between what's going on in Strange Days and the parallels with today's society. Because, again, Strange Days was back in 1995. And I watched a movie, and I watched it years ago. I didn't see it in the theater. I probably saw it on DVD. So 1996. So you're talking about 10 years ago that I saw this film, and then I rewatched it. If you're interested, I believe it's still on. So if you have Amazon Instant Video, you can do a 7-day trial of, I think it's either Stars or Showtime. I think it's Stars, and Strange Days is on there. You can watch it for free and then cancel within 7 days. So if you're that type of person, you can go right ahead and do that. Because I don't think it's available in digitally unless you get it off a torrent. I don't think there's a viable way to get just a digital copy, or even a Blu-ray for that matter. I think it's DVD still exclusive. One of the things I did not realize was that Catherine Bigelow was actually the director of this. And I mean, people obviously they know her from The Hurt Locker. They know her from Zero Dark 30, and people probably don't realize that she was the director of Point Break, which was probably one of the better heist style movies. I mean, it was.
I did not know that.
It was, basically, it was funny because when Point Break actually was being remade in modern times, when they redid one, I don't even know if it's been out yet. I mean, that's how disinterested I was in there actually being a remake, because there should never be of that. And I kind of said, well, you know what? They already did a remake of Point Break. It was called Fast and the Furious, which is essentially the same exact story. But not only with that, but Catherine Bigelow was also the director of Near Dark, which anybody who grew up, in the 80s knows that was the opposite side of the coin between Lost Boys and Near Dark. So you had Lance Hendrickson as the crazed Western style vampire. You had Bill Paxton in a maniacal, role. I mean, it was just a really good, well done film that kind of didn't get the credit it deserved because Lost Boys came out at the same time, and it was kind of like, oh, well, be cool, live forever, blah, 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 with a lot of, top name actors in it. So it kind of didn't get that attention, but it's become kind of a cult classic. But yeah, between that and
right.
Point Break,
and Near Dark was a little B movie-ish, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And there's like just a brutal bar scene where they slaughter everybody in the bar. But it was a really good film, and I actually got they came out with like not a collector's edition, but a new version of it on DVD, and I picked up a copy of it, and I really, went through it and enjoyed it. So she's clearly a very talented director. James Cameron wrote the screenplay to Strange Days, and it was an absolute and utter flop in a theater. It was critically panned for the most part. I think Roger Ebert was pretty kind to it, and it almost ruined her career. It took a while before she actually started directing again. And in recent times, probably over the last 5 years, it's starting to get the credit that it kind of deserved as being a little bit ahead of its time. Some of the point of view camera angles were new during that time, so it added an interesting element to it. And overall, the storyline was just a really good cyberpunk story. I mean, you had a lot of the traditional cyberpunk elements. I mean, you have a pulp noir anti-hero named Lenny Nero. How much more cyberpunk can you get than that?
Right.
I mean, perfect name. But there's a lot of things to like about this movie. And I know it has some connections to Neuromancer with the squid device. And so what
right. Now I'll say this. So the SQUID is an acronym for superconducting quantum interference device, which basically reads your brainwave patterns and is able to send and receive data to create, an alternate reality inside your mind.
Right. And that's a fantastic plot device for this movie. And that's about as much of the technological cyberpunk elements that you actually get in this entire film.
That's what I really like about the movie.
Yes.
Is that it's a movie with really cool tech, and it isn't a movie about the tech. So they spend the whole movie talking about it and belaboring its abilities. It's just a thing. It does what it does, and it comes back into play when it needs to push the story forward. But they don't keep throwing this squid in your face, like making, oh, look at this cool idea we came up with. It's subtle, but it's powerful.
Right. The storyline and the setting is what's important, and even the storyline is very much a traditional cyberpunk, good guy kind of bad guy type deal. But the way they go about it, I thought was great. I mean, you basically have two. I guess you could call them antagonists. You have two of them. I mean, you have Lenny Nero, of course, who is, now I say Ralph Fiennes, but I've been told that it's Rafe. Apparently,
it is
he
Rafe.
likes to pronounce his name differently than everybody else, but he does a fantastic job in this. I mean, he is just a squirmy, seems to kind of sort of have a heart of gold, really wants to do the right thing, but he's been beaten down enough by society that he kind of takes the easy way out, and that's why he becomes, a dealer in these memory discs. But it also has, Angela Bassett as Mace, who, by the way, looks gorgeous in this movie. And I think this is the movie where I kind of recognized not just her talents as an actress, but how pretty she actually was. And she's beautiful. And she's more of your traditional hero. I mean, she saves his life several times.
She is. She's the moral center. Right. And Lenny is, he's a former cop who, and what I like is they never actually explain what his fall from grace was, only that he had one.
Right.
And I like that because not given all the story, just gives a little background flavor without kind of just having to waste all this useless exposition. Yeah, he was a cop. Now he's not. Now he deals with, they call these, clips, and that they're illegal because basically, as you can imagine, a government would not want people selling things that alter your mind. And these clips, basically this squid, you put it on, and it's, imagine just like a YouTube that you could plug into your brain, right? Everyone's running around with a GoPro, and you can feel what they feel at the time they're doing this. And most of the time it's either sex or it's somebody doing an armed robbery, something that'll, get adrenaline going, right? It's not going to you're not going to go buy these black market clips of somebody just watching TV, right? It's going to be something thrilling. And so that's the premise, that he's selling these things. And he is. He's a very handsome man, but despite being handsome and kind of very almost doting on his expensive clothes as being a salesman, he finds it very important. Right. He's also got this patina of he's somehow greasy or dirty in some way, almost like no matter how much he tries to navigate the filth of the streets that he deals on, he can't quite get it all off of him, and he carries that with him.
Absolutely. He fits the setting perfectly.
Right.
Much better than the femme fatale of the film, which is, of course, Juliette Lewis. Character name is Faith, who, I mean, honestly, my wife watched it for the first time with me, and she gets to the part where, Juliette Lewis, Faith, is singing into the microphone, and, my wife is basically like, why does she look like she's trying to take a dump? And it was basically every scene in which she's on the microphone, she's kind of got this kind of squatting, I want to really pump out this ballad, but I can't really sing thing going on.
Really? You didn't? I see. I thought this was Juliette Lewis's best performance in any movie. Although Dusk Till Dawn's great, but it was kind of a minor role that she had there. This was, I don't know, fantastic. I thought everyone who acted in this, all the acting, all of it was top notch.
Well, when Vincent D'Onofrio is playing a bit role in your film, you must have a lot of really good actors. So.
Seriously. And he's probably the best part. I mean, he's channeling his character, his Sergeant Pyle from Full Metal Jacket. He's channeling that nightmarish, you see him and there's that thing that, for me anyway, it's the thing that sort of triggers your fight or flight. He is demonic in this movie, and it is beautiful.
Yeah, and in the role of a police officer, which is fantastic. And we'll get into kind of his storyline a little bit later because it is really good. And of course we have, to go back over, the actors that are kind of in it. I mean, William Fisher is his counterpart, of course. So right away he's a bad guy because he's a bad guy in almost everything. Michael Wincott as Philo Gant, I don't think it's enough credit because he does a fantastic job of kind of playing that. I don't know, just kind of that.
Well, he's got a very powerful presence.
Right.
So he's great at being a very evil, effective leader, like somebody who's very imposing.
Right, without having to do too much. He definitely has that presence about him.
And for those not familiar with Michael Wincott, he was the main bad guy in The Crow, the Brandon Lee one, who, again, he was a character who didn't have to shout to display menace.
Right.
That's a very hard, effective thing for an actor to do, though. If you can really do that well, that is a scene stealer every time.
And then the only issue with the movie, and it's not even really an issue, I mean, Tom Sizemore as Max, always felt he was a great actor. The biggest problem is that he usually plays a bad guy in almost every film lately. So the moment he shows up on screen, my wife Heather is like, he's the bad guy. He did it. So there's that you kind of, because of the typecasting of certain actors, you kind of lost some of the mystique of the film. And you were able to kind of call out some of the elements of okay, well, I can tell that this is going to happen, or that this person, is going to turn on him or something like that, just based on the actors that's been put into it. And that's kind of a shame because he plays a good role kind of as the buddy cop who's, I got your back. But at the end you find out that, he's really whacked out.
Yeah, true. But, the funny thing is, so he's another former cop.
Right.
Who they allude to some sort of injury or something that he had that kind of put him out of, the profession. And where we mentioned Lenny Nero being kind of not fully capable of keeping the filth of the street off of him, it's almost as if Tom Sizemore's character just completely embraced it. I mean, he's just even if you didn't assume because it's Tom Sizemore playing the character that he's going to be the bad guy, he's so scummy. He's such a scumbag. Uh-huh. You know what I mean? Just even right from the aesthetic, from scene one, you're like, oh, he's dirty, man. He's just dirty.
So we mentioned about how Mace is kind of the moral center of the story. And one thing that I didn't pick up on the first time I watched a movie, but what's rather consistent, if you read some of the commentary on it, is the difference of portrayal between Caucasians and African Americans within the film. And one of the things that a couple of articles, and I think the wiki even brings this up, is where it talks about how African Americans seem to be future looking and more caught up in what can we do with this, as opposed to a lot of the white people in the film who are just kind of living in this moment and fully accept the fact that, this is the way the world is. And I thought that was an interesting dynamic that was very subtle. I mean, you had the rap artist who was more of a Malcolm X style prophet in how he talked about politics. Jericho One, which is a great name for him. And it was interesting to read that because, of course, this was 1995, and this was not long after the Rodney King incident, and it was one of the things that actually kind of inspired some of the elements in the film. And this idea of not just police brutality towards African Americans, but police brutality in general. There was definitely a different context between white people who were kind of just letting it go and I'll just deal with it unless it clearly gets into my face, versus the African Americans, the black people in the film, who it was an everyday part of their life, and they were really trying to fight back against it. And to see that dichotomous point of view between the two races in the film, it was not just relevant then, but it's relevant today, which is amazing.
Absolutely. You could have taken Jericho. So there's a scene in the movie where Jericho 1 has this he gets on a podium, not being just an entertainer, but even as we do today, entertainers have a lot of influence. So of course we give them often a forum to speak and represent issues. So Jericho 1 has this sort of like pivotal moment where he's given a big speech in front of a crowd just about police brutality. And he says, America's been my nightmare for 400 years. And so he's talking about, how hard it is to be a black person in the United States. That you could have just taken that speech and played it at a Black Lives Matter rally, and it would have been it would have been right in place. Like the way it sort of presaged that is amazing.
And we're 10 years. We're 10 years from the time when I saw this film. We're 11 years later from when this film was made, 12 years probably from when it was conceived. And the attempts at addressing what was being addressed in that film really, what has been going on in the last decade is really, if you watch this film knowing how old it was and seeing what's in there, and you have to, and what influenced it, and you just start to think to yourself, how is it possible that this much time has gone by and it feels like we have not advanced at all. Which I just, and that's, to me, that's a part of what makes art like this great, is it allows you to kind of to ruminate over things like that. And it was just amazing watching Strange Days again after such a long time and seeing those parallels from 10, 11, 12 years ago to today, and how relevant it still was. And to me, that's what makes a great story, is one that no matter when you watch it or when you read it or when you listen to it, depending on what type of story it is, it's still relevant to what you're doing today.
Yeah, and that's why I like this movie in particular, because, the funny thing is, you had mentioned before it was a flop, and it was. The budget for it, I'm looking at the wiki, was $42 million. The box office brought in $8 million, which is really interesting because obviously people just weren't tuned in to whatever the movie was about, right? So some movies don't age well. Some movies, when they're ahead of their time, just become even better. This is one of those movies where you can watch it now. The production quality is fine. There's, it doesn't rely so heavily on a lot of any CGI, really, right? It's because the playback, when people are jacking in to do the playback from the squid, it's not like there's anything special. They just do some video effects to let you know that now you're watching it from a first person perspective.
Right.
And I kind of want to get back to the squid thing for a moment, because again, there's another parallel there. But that's a movie that you could watch it today. It makes more sense probably to people today than it even did 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
Which is awesome. And that, just massive credit to James Cameron for being that kind of, visionary, because that's just true ability to really see things in a way from a great distance.
Right.
And I think that's just a lot of talent. But, even one of the things I think that parallels in another one in the movie is the way that people are interested in living and experiencing, getting closer to the lives of other people. Now, we've had that for a long time. It's nothing new. with lifestyles of rich and famous, even right in the 80s. So now we've got Twitch gaming. People watch other people play video games. We've got YouTube, of course, where we just watch people talk, or GoPro is a huge phenomenon now. Now we're just watching people strap on a camera to their face and run around, ride a motorcycle,
Periscope,
do whatever, run on a beach. Yeah, Periscope.
Instagram
all this live
stories,
blogging.
Absolutely. There's so much interest in knowing what's going on, with other people, and kind of keeping this narrative open throughout all of the people that and obviously the idea of hiding behind a screen, which is clearly what a lot of people do in the internet. And if you suddenly, we've advanced it. We have the HoloLens, we have Google Glass, we have these type of technologies that are
HTC Vive and the Oculus Rift,
low end. One of my coworker brought in a cheap Samsung VR helmet that was plugged into his phone and showed how you could play, Netflix videos on it, and it plays the video on a screen that's in front of you, but there's chairs like kind of next to you, and then if you go to turn to either side, it was cheap. It was like it was given to him for free for getting a phone, and the technology in it was more than what we had 5-10 years ago. And
absolutely, even Google Cardboard does that.
Absolutely,
you can just stick any phone in there and just watch YouTube videos like you're in a movie theater.
It's absolutely amazing, and it's cool to see Cameron take an element from. And the squid was that came out of Neuromancer, right? At least generally the idea of it, I think, came from William Gibson's stories, and they took that and said, this is the plot device. This is what's going to propel the plot, and then I'm going to take a timeless story, and I'm going to wrap it around this kind of time. I'm going to wrap this timeless story around it, and I'm going to put in these elements of things that kind of matter in the real world. And I think they just did a fantastic job with it.
Yeah, they really did. It was taken from Gibson. Gibson had a couple different ideas. He had, ironically, things in his books called Microsofts, which is really funny. But what they were was almost like it would look like when you see these people with hearing aids that are kind of right behind their ear, like a big just chunk of plastic. Well, it would look something like that. And then you would have these little fiber optic pins they could put into different holes in that device. And basically, almost like the Matrix, you could just like slot in a Microsoft, and it would have like you would know Kung Fu, or you would have a history. You would whatever knowledge or whatever sort of behavioral thing you wanted to know, you could just slot into it. And then, of course, in some versions, like I think some short stories, Gibson would have people entering in the Matrix or cyberspace with like that, like a headband with like just little nodes that would kind of interact externally, through contact with the skin. And then other times he would just have those Microsofts where you would just jack into your neurological system. But yeah, it's all the same concept, and I just think it's amazing because it goes from saying, oh, that'd be a neat concept, to wow, if that technology actually existed today, people would definitely be doing that. There's no question about it, right? And it's almost to the point where some people might even believe that it exists, right? Because it's already so close to what we have and what we're willing to do.
The headset obviously goes on top. It doesn't cover your eyes. The squid doesn't cover your eyes, but it interfaces with your brain. And if you watch some of the science programs, they actually are finding ways to stimulate parts of the brain in order to produce certain types of experiences at the very least. So today we have a VR headset, but 2 years from now, we might have a VR headset that has, nodes in it that stimulate certain parts from the outside, into your brain in order to cause certain feelings. If you get punched in the face, you can suddenly feel it, or, any sort of sexual context when it comes to something like, virtual reality. It's coming, and it's coming quickly. And that was always the beauty of a show like maybe Black Mirror and various cyberpunk stories, where I always thought they were most effective when they were very close to happening.
Right. And and just like in Strange Days, those kinds of clips are considered illegal, presumably because they alter the mind in ways that might be unpredictable. And of course they can kill. Right. There's a thing called blackjack clips, which I love that, because it's the idea of like, jacking into something dark, blackjack, and it's just a nice, concise term.
It's such a great noir term for this type of story,
And so there's these blackjack clips where, of course, it's snuff films, but you're experiencing either the death of a person, or killing somebody. And I think blackjack is when the person who, because of course, and I don't know if we mentioned this, but for people who haven't seen the movie, in order to create a clip, a person also has to wear a squid and then go do the thing. And they're recording that whole simulacrum, that whole time. Well, it's not a simulacrum. It's the direct experience, their adrenaline, their feeling of it. You know, running on a beach, you can feel the wind, all of it. That whole sensorium is recorded. And then it's, you know, based on these clips. So when you die, it's recorded. And some people, of course, would have a curiosity about that. I can't honestly even say I wouldn't be curious, right? But I would be concerned. What is the ramifications on my health?
Right.
And of course, in the movie, squids can be used to kill people because it is injecting frequencies into your brain. So certain frequencies, obviously, you could overload and overstimulate your brain, and or, you know, people didn't die, right? They just fried.
Yeah, it was they didn't go too far into telling us if there was a way out from that, but yeah, they basically were fried, which is almost, I guess, you know, would be clinically brain dead at that point, right?
Yeah, you're brain dead. So yeah,
yeah, because they even showed from another individual's perspective, and he could still see what was going on, you know, outside, but he was basically comatose, and he was seeing static, you know, and like psychedelic color,
right?
And
yeah,
everything.
Yeah. So, but in the movie, it's illegal. They're illegal for the reasons stated, and I would totally see for the same reasons. Plus, also our government also kind of has an embarrassingly poor understanding of technology. They would just ban it because they don't understand it. But our government would definitely see a technology like this and most likely ban it.
Right. Absolutely. And another thing about this movie, I mean, we talked about, you know, Vincent D'Onofrio and his story where he's not a central character, but he's in the film. He pops up a couple of times, him and William Fisher. And the thing that I appreciate about this movie is the subtle plot twist. I mean, the whole movie gears up as there's a murder, and then he's trying to figure out what's going on with that murder. And then it kind of wraps into this kind of grand conspiracy, which includes the entire police force and race relations. And when you finally get, you know, the disc that shows the murder, when you finally realize what's going on, you get that plot twist of there was no grand conspiracy. It was two idiot cops who decided upon themselves that they were going to mess with, you know, Jericho 1 and ended up killing him. And kind of everything that kind of snowballed after that, you know, was just a result of this poor decision and various people trying to cover things up. But there was no grand conspiracy. And I appreciate that when a film sets up something kind of that simple as its endpoint, and because it's not just that it's simple, but it's both simple and deep, because it's simple in that there was no grand conspiracy, but it's deep in that you take that into context of what's going on around you and how something as simple as that can affect all of those race relations, and how the African Americans in the film feel about the police force, and, you know, how the white people feel in general. And you kind of look at that today with Black Lives Matters and some of these cop shootings. We have that. We generally look at it and we decide that, okay, well, cops are shooting black people, you know, it's the cops' fault. But we don't know the full context of the story. We don't, you know what I'm trying to say? Like
I do. See, yeah, no. If I can add to that, it's that you know, what happens is certain in the movie, and how this kind of really parallels our lives now. There was an event that took place that had such an impact on all these different people who were not connected really, but they just it had this sort of like just like the shockwave effect.
Right.
And it almost seemed like it was all by design, but it wasn't. It's just that people were affected, and you got to see how they were affected and how they interacted with each other. And that happens today.
Right.
You know, you think there's some grand scheme, but really what it is, and this is exactly the point that I think the character Jericho 1 was trying to say, is there are cultural issues that have to be addressed. Right. And it's not that people are scheming or conspiring. It's just that when a very powerful moment happens, whether the power of it is negative or positive, it affects people, and then everyone reacts and gets involved in some way. And it seems like there's a driving force, but there isn't. It's just humanity,
right? And I think it's simpler today to believe that. You know, there is some conspiracy in which, you know, black youths are being singled out and eliminated by some grand, you know, scheme by police forces across the nation, instead of saying, here are a bunch of people put in extremely stressful situations who have made poor decisions that have cost people their lives and and in exchange cost the cops their lives or their families, or caused a great amount of grief throughout a community. And you're right, there's that domino effect. There's this thing kind of snowballing of, because there is a problem with these cultural issues that we fail to address, a simple event can kick off a chain reaction of other events that just blows things out of the water. And we get so caught up in trying to see things from 10,000 feet and divide things up into categories that we don't address, the kind of the minutiae. We don't address the actual base matters of it all. It's much easier for us to believe in an us versus them mentality than it is for us to say, well, wait a minute, what actually went on here? And is there a way to solve it? And of course, in your traditional cyberpunk storytelling, if the idea is that corporations are controlling everything, the best way to do that is to divide and conquer, keep us at each other's throats, so that we don't look at the people actually behind the curtain. And it's go ahead.
No, go ahead. Okay. So, and the thing is too, in the movie, of course, there is somebody who drives the idea that there's a conspiracy, because it's Tom Sizemore's character, Max Peltier, is what he actually says. There's a whole moment where he says it's this huge conspiracy. He's making this big deal out of it, really, and he's just trying to throw off
Lenny.
Lenny Nero's character, the character. So he's just trying to throw him off, but there never really was one. It was always just this simple event. And like you said, a domino effect around it. And Max was sort of trying to capitalize on that for his own personal gain, because he was trying to Max's whole role, all he wants to do in the whole movie is just play Lenny. And he does really effectively. Right. And the movie does a great job of bringing you in as the viewer. You think, oh man, it's this big conspiracy. Even though you don't really trust Max, I don't think you're ever supposed to trust him.
Right.
You're like, wow. So it does, because all of these events are happening. So it's believable within the context of the movie. But you're right, and I'm glad you pointed out that it's this simple thing. It's not a great thing, the murder,
right.
But it's one thing that just happens, and it wasn't planned. It just happened, and the movie does a phenomenal job at the end of bringing it right back to something simple. And I don't know. I mean, did you want to talk about the ending? Do we want to do spoilers?
No, we absolutely can. It's movie's 12 years old by now, so
right. And I just the great thing is, and it's very deliberate. I'm sure the casting and the characters were written this way for a real specific reason. You're talking about New Year's Eve, everything goes down.
Right.
So you're talking about not just a new year, new beginning. You're talking about a new century.
Yeah,
right.
1999 and into 2000.
Right, and the movie wants to have it does, despite the fact that it's traditional bleak cyberpunk setting. The movie begins with Lenny driving down the street, watching all this violence, while Lords of Acid plays on his car, and he's just doing deals and eating pizza and everything. But it brings you to the end. You get through all the big grand conspiracy stuff. You find out it's just some stupid, random, awful event that happens. And the whole movie, though, the Pandora's box has been opened. We have all these troubled race relations, all these issues going on. And the end, I think, was very sweet. And it's nice, right? Because they didn't try to leave it like a cliffhanger or leave some big question hanging where we have to answer it ourselves. Lenny was always a love interest of Mace.
Right.
Mace cared for him, and they didn't hide that. They made it very obvious. She knew him when he was still a cop, and she knew what a good person he could be, despite the fact that she did not like that he was a clip dealer. And they go through all this stuff, and finally, in the end, I think Lenny realizes, and perhaps it's based on partially a reflection of his life, but then his eyes are open through all of this stuff. He's a white male. She's a black female, and in the end, they sort of find each other through all this chaos, and they have their kiss, and it's a really great moment. I mean, I wouldn't call it romantic, but it's like it gives the closure that you want, I think, and it's a statement about race relations.
Absolutely, because all the way up into the end, you still felt that something bad was going to happen, even though we knew that it was a small event, and that's the problem is if this small event is not addressed and isn't exposed for what it is, it was going to cause great turmoil throughout the city, potentially throughout the nation because of race relations. But the hard ass white cop who you wouldn't expect to care at all about, anybody in the black community actually does look at the material on the squid that Mace had delivered to him, which, by the way, Lenny's character was not going to give that to her. Lenny's character was actually going to use that to bargain for, his ex-wife or his ex, for Faith. He was going to use that as a bargaining chip. And she basically told him, you can't do this. And this is when he starts to, he always kind of had that good heart.
This is his character arc.
Yeah. And he's starting to come around to it. And he's like, and so he gives it to her and he says, look, that guy's ass is so tight that if there's anybody on the force who's not corrupt, it's him. And she gives it to him and he kind of blows her off and she gets upset figuring all cops are the same. Finally, there's a chase scene because, Vincent D'Onofrio's character and William Fisher's character are coming after her. And, even all the way up to the end, it looked like, her time was done.
It was, especially you had mentioned Rodney King.
Right.
And when you get to this point in the movie.
That's what you're saying. Right.
Yeah, it's not even like, oh, I wonder if. It's clearly right in the middle of this massive New Year's Eve celebration in New York City. Vincent D'Onofrio, what is his name in this?
Burton Steckler.
Burton Steckler. Yeah. So Burton Steckler catches up to her. He handcuffs her, and there's just a scene. It's very dramatic and very powerful where he's beating her with a stick. I mean, it's Rodney King. He's beating her with a stick. And it's just this massive dramatic moment. You think this is where the movie tries to make its really sad but strong statement, and it happily goes a different direction.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if he was the chief of police. I don't have his name offhand, so I don't know who the actor was. But he shows up. He did look at the film. They arrest the two cops, Burton Steckler and William Fisher's character, Dwayne Engelman, and one of them. So was it Burton Steckler that shoots himself? Yeah. So Vincent D'Onofrio's character kills himself, and then William Fisher's character decides that he's going to try to murder Mace, and he just gets gunned down.
No, I'm sorry. I got Vincent D'Onofrio tries to kill her. What happens is his partner Michael Wincott, or no, I'm sorry, that's Philo. It's just tough keeping it. So, Vincent D'Onofrio's character. He plays Officer Steckler. Right. What is the other guy's name?
It's William Fisher. So Dwayne Engelman.
That is William Fisher. So William Fisher, who was never really evil, like he was actually like the least, like he was just kind of like, oh crap, I guess we got to do this to cover up because I don't want to get in trouble. Right. But when the police descend on him, and it's Palmer Strickland is the name of like the police chief or whatever. He comes in. That's when. His partner, the skinny guy, shoots himself. And now, again, we're kind of coming back to like this D'Onofrio is great at being evil with blood all over his face. Now watching his partner shoot himself because things got completely out of hand. D'Onofrio then pulls out his gun, curses at, a handcuffed Mace. Right. And is ready to shoot her after he's beaten the crap out of her with his nightstick. And of course the police. It's like an aerial view, and there's like these lights, and all the people are shocked. Like nobody's still partying. Right. Like once this starts to go down, people are shocked and almost disgusted by what's happening. And Steckler is just so like out of it at this point, like just with rage and insanity. Yeah, he goes to kill the character, and you think this is it, and they just wind up shooting him down.
Right, and you're right, and that turns into, Lenny Nero is the star of the film now, but Mace is the hero. She's saved his life several times. She's clearly only around him because she harbors love for him. I'm sure not just on a platonic level, but obviously on a more romantic level. Otherwise, she wouldn't be there. She'd have left his ass a long time ago. And ultimately, at the end, she did help redeem his character, and it kind of does add a little bit of light to what is essentially an extremely dark film. They don't play it as dark as it actually is. Because then it would just be depressing. But they were able to kind of, and I think you have to, at a film like that, where you, especially at that time, right after the Rodney King incident, to have a part of the film that parallels that, I don't think you can end it any other way. I think you have to end it on a note.
Yeah, you need some payoff.
Right, and you have to end it on a note to where, race relations, at least on an individual level, begin to heal. Because just like we said, that where a small incident because of cultural differences can cause this snowball, can cause this huge ramifications across, an entire city or an entire nation. That's on an individual basis. So the solution ends up being also on an individual basis. So it's that kind of, macrocosm, reflecting the microcosm thing, the story reflecting something greater as a whole.
Right, because the movie really is asking. You've got all of this background stuff couched in cyberpunk world, but really the movie's asking the audience, can black and white people see past all of the troubles and just come together, right? It's a real simple question. You know, it might be a little hokey or maybe a little too simplistic considering the complexity of the issues, but it is a simple question. Like you said, with simple events and simple one-on-one human interactions, can people come together regardless of their race? And the movie wants to give a hopeful, if not a bleak path to that answer. Yes, with the two main characters kind of coming together and saying, you know, that love can be found regardless of who you are.
That's it for this episode of Codepunk. You can subscribe to this podcast on Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher, or listen to it on the web at codepunk.io. You can find Bill on Twitter at Northustra and Michael on Twitter at Zool.